decided today is, our meetings tend to run long. We decided instead of a 25-minute bio, we're just going to cut the bio down really short and let our speakers speak for themselves. I can tell you, without getting into their bios, we have two very accomplished men here who have some extremely impressive things that they've done, as well as the vision that I like from both of them. One is a great example of what we've been talking about: education, employment, entrepreneurship. And then the other one, he's going to tell you about something that you probably may never heard of before. It's called competitive inclusiveness, and the impact of technology and having our students be players in creating the next technologies and being a part of taking some of the older things in our society and making them more efficient. You know, you use Netflix. And don't go to Hollywood videos like that. There's all kinds of things that out there that can be changed using technology. He's going to talk about that. So what I did was I asked Mr. Berry if he could just give me a brief piece of information so I can introduce him. And I learned a couple of things about him that are pretty impressive. First of all, he's in technology. That's impressive to me. Second of all, being a CEO, we all know that if you own something, you can make a real impact. But the thing that I learned was his father was a Tuskegee Airman. And so it says a lot about understanding our history and having that strong mentor and role model to emulate. He got a degree in computer applications management from a school in Portland, and then he had an MBA from UCLA. And so I'm going to have him come on first, and he's going to dive into his conversation for about 20 minutes. And then after that, we will have Mike Green come on and talk about competitive inclusiveness. Here he is, Barry, CEO.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here this morning. I drove from Portland, Oregon about 3 o'clock in the morning. No traffic at 3 o'clock in the morning. Easy sailing. My journey actually began in Kansas City, Kansas, where I was born. My father, who was a Tuskegee Airman, decided to take us to Los Angeles because I had polio when I was a child. And they were going to treat me at the LA County Hospital. I was there about 6 months. But because he took the initiative to leave Kansas and go to California, he actually went to USC, and he became the first African American to receive an aeronautical engineering degree from USC. And he actually met Howard Hughes, who encouraged him to go to USC. One day, Dad came home from the aerospace industry. He said, "Family, we're going to move to this place called Portland, Oregon." And see, I was a junior, getting ready to go into my junior year of high school. And I said, "Portland, Oregon." See, I didn't know if you went past the Oregon, the California border, you could actually get back. But we went up to Oregon, and then they lived there about 7 years, and the rest is history. But that's where I got my science and technology encouragement from my father in his area of study. So I'm going to show you, since there's no remote, I'm going to walk over here. We're going to talk about Airship Technologies Group, but we're going to talk about the history first that got me there. Airship Technologies Group is a design and manufacturing company for unmanned aerial vehicles. Oh, this is fantastic.
Bring the stand over.
I think it's good. It's good. But before there was an airship, there was college. And we'll talk about the vehicle, but I want to talk about what happened before then. So in 1970, I graduated from Grant High School, and I'm thinking that I was going to be a science and technology major. And actually went to Pepperdine for the first semester and then came back. I majored in life science, had a degree in life science, eventually came back and got a computer applications management degree. But I started in this life science biotech field, but worked with computers at AT&T all the way through college. So I had a basic understanding of technology from AT&T. Then moved it into the applications development management ranks as a manager for 3 hospitals in Minneapolis. Then went overseas to Saudi Arabia, where I became the applications manager for the King Fahd National Guard Hospital, my first international assignment. Did that for 2 years, left that contractor for 2 years, and then worked for the Royal Saudi Air Force, U.S. Air Force, putting military logistics in their 8 air bases. Then returned and came back to Los Angeles, worked for Hughes Aircraft Company as their manager of corporate computer services. Did that for 6 years. Went back to Saudi, ran their international airports, so Riyadh, Jeddah, and Dhahran, all before the first Gulf War. I'm glad I did that before the first Gulf War kicked in. But when I returned, I said, now I'm only going to apply for chief level positions. It was a mental decision because the chief information officer had just come into vogue in terms of a job creation. My first assignment was at the Oregon Employment Department as their chief technology officer. I told them I would be there 2 years because I was growing a career. I was there 2 years to the day and became CIO for Multnomah County. I told them I'd be there for 2 years, so I was growing the career. And then I became chief technology officer for the Providence Health Systems, Oregon, so 8 hospitals, about 33 clinics. And then I became CIO for the Department of Transportation. So there's a common theme here, still technology applications, infrastructure, because most organizations, be it public or private or not-for-profit, all have a technology base to them. And so I was able to use that as a launching pad across multiple industries, in fact 7 industries. And today I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the City of Portland, and I run Airship Technologies Group. So that's been the journey of how we get to Airship. Started out in non-management, middle management, eventually senior executive management. Yeah. So why Airship? Well, in 2011, I was giving a presentation about entrepreneurs, and I had 2 ideas. I had initially designed the Airship unmanned aerial vehicle in '91 when I worked for Hughes Aircraft Company. But a lot of the technologies didn't exist at the time in terms of solar film, because we wanted this to be a clean tech propulsion. And carbon fiber was pretty expensive at the time. So that design sat on the shelf for a couple of decades. So it's never too late to become an entrepreneur, folks. You can do it whenever the time is right. But I was also talking to my father, who began helping me design this air vehicle. So we did it jointly together. This market is a growing market. In fact, today it's about a $5.9 million market. It's growing annually at 11.3 billion, and it'll be 94 billion by 2017. So I think I made the right choice on the right market. So drones, that's the word we don't like to call these aircraft, but that's what the media calls them. They're really unmanned aerial vehicles. There is a great public sector as well as military advantage for these aircraft. And the FAA will allow us to sell these aircraft to first responders come September of next year. Huge, huge market. Fire, police, search and rescue, they're all considered first responders. Even the news media who use helicopters today are considered first responders. Public health organizations, first responders, even departments of transportation. Huge, huge market. In fact, the military is spending the most, not on fixed wing aircraft, but on UAVs going into the future. So when we talk about being competitive as an entrepreneur, we had to have something that would stand apart from our other UAVs. Most of the drones you might see are the 4-rotor, the 6-rotor, the 8-rotor copters. We didn't have any place to put solar film on that kind of an airframe on those kinds of aircraft. So we had to design this aircraft with a large surface area in which to apply solar film. And then we simply recharge ultracapacitors, which are inside the aircraft. Now, ultracapacitors are similar to batteries, but they're lighter than batteries. They charge up really, really fast, and they dissipate energy very slowly. So now we have a winning competitive product, whereas our competition flies 35 minutes to 4 hours, we target 30 to 90 days. We simply fly on solar for 12 hours during the daytime, we fly on the ultracapacitors at night, then we repeat the cycle the next day, the next day, the next day. Now when you have an aerial service delivery platform like that, now you can start putting up services versus just taking the aircraft out of the vehicle and flying it. So we envision a service called AirScape, which will allow for first responders to subscribe to aerial video on demand. So when law enforcement or fire need video, we'll fly 2 or 3 over the cities, say the size of Portland. We'll reuse the service on one platform. We'll sell that for $4,500 to $10,000 per year per customer, depending on supply and demand of the market, and we'll do that across the country.
And we'll also sell the aircraft too. The aircraft, this is the design of it. Most of the competitors do not have internal payload bays. So as a part of our competitiveness, we wanted to make sure that our customers would have space in order to put additional equipment that's important for their use case, for their mission. So we don't make the solar film. We buy the solar film from a company called Alta Devices. It has about 28% efficiency, which is fantastic with this lightweight fabric that is made custom over the surface of the aircraft. Here's the calculus behind the energy consumption. So most people say, well, how'd you do that? It's not really rocket science. It's just making reuse of products that already exist in the marketplace, ultracapacitors and the solar film. We control this aircraft 2 ways. It's a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, but it's also a fixed wing aircraft. So once we are up on all 3 rotors, we literally dial off the lateral rotors, roll up the rear rotor to 90 degrees, and the aircraft is pushed as it skims using the lift of its wings. Most of our competition are all out with all 4, 6, 8 rotors. They use all their power very quickly. And when you can take 2/3 of your power demand off the requirement, that allows you to get more propulsion. The sensors that come with this aircraft, we don't make the sensors either. So we team with Lockheed Martin for their sensors, but we also have a company called Sightline, an Oregon company, that allows for video of tracking a single object or multiple objects. Think about law enforcement trying to track the mileage of vehicles. We've had requests for that from actually the Republic of Panama. So we know that the sensors are going to be valuable not just for the military, but for public requirements. The other competitive advantage we were going for, our aircraft can already take off from a boat, a ship, land. It can also take off from water today. And so when law enforcement, especially search and rescue, are getting in the water to search for things and divers, we can have the aircraft skim the water. The camera sits in the water. It can show you the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance without those officers having to get in the water. Our customers asked us, well, what about a submersible? And this was a military customer.
So we applied to the DARPA initiative, which is going to have unmanned subs that will sit about 300 meters down, stationed around the world to be able to launch unmanned aerial vehicles, submersible unmanned aerial vehicles. And because the pressure is so great at 300 meters, you have to have a pod in which the aircraft will sit. Once the aircraft is in the pod, the wings are unfolded at about 15 meters right before it surfaces. It can do its reconnaissance under the water, it can surface, and then take off and do aerial surveillance. So here's some of our competitors. The Dragonfly, the F-Pass, the Pointer, the Raven, the Buster. Our price on the V2, which is our base, we have 4 different designs. The V2 is our smallest design. It's about 3 feet by 3 feet.
It sells for $29,500 with minimal sensors. The next competitor is about 60 to 70,000. The next one, 300,000. Pointers 35, where you can kind of see we're very, very competitive on that base unit. So we project a lot of sales. In fact, the sales on the B2 are 6,120 over the next 2 years, but we already have 287 pre-orders between our B2 models and our B5 models. The B5s look like the B2s, but they're twice the size. They're 6 feet by 6 feet. I'm going to skip that one. You can't really see the chart. Here's another camera that we acquired through Lockheed Martin, the Perceptor. This provides for electro-optics for both fixed viewing and video, but also it has a infrared, so you can see at night, and laser pointer. The other camera sensor we use is the FLIR system that's made in Oregon. This is called the Cobalt 90. It's about half the price of the Lockheed Martin. Here's how we mount that FLIR camera in the nose of the B2. And this is our design for that submersible. So any V2 or V5 can be made into a submersible by the addition of a ballast tank under the belly and a pump. So that's an add-on option for the V2 and V5. We wanted it that way so we didn't have to totally redesign this aircraft. As long as we displace the weight of the aircraft about 20%, the aircraft will actually sink and do its reconnaissance. We also use Lockheed Martin's Proceris autonomous system. So that today you can actually fly these aircraft through a remote control handheld device for about 1 to 3 miles out. You can fly it based on the internet. You can also fly it autonomously by defining the waypoints, the GPS waypoints, based on this program. This is a laptop program, and you can actually define multiple UAVs simultaneously. So if you need to fly them in clusters of 2, 4, 6, the same pattern, be it a straight line, or circle, or triangle, they'll all use the same commands for that mission. Now, let's talk about the use cases. There's the urban area surveillance, which is law enforcement. There's the rural area surveillance. Many of these we've had, like from Panama and some of the overseas countries, they're looking to patrol the rural areas. Public safety and law enforcement, traffic monitoring we talked about. We're right now under non-disclosure working with Verizon innovation programs on the emergency disaster recovery UAV. So once you have a storm like Superstorm Sandy and on the East Coast, a lot of the telecommunications towers were knocked out. The Philippines had a huge disaster. A lot of stuff was knocked out. These telecom service providers can fly these UAVs. They'll pull the signal down from a Viasat satellite, for example, to a laptop-sized ground station. That ground station, through line of sight back up to the UAV, will convert that signal to Wi-Fi. And that Wi-Fi will be good for about 1 mile in diameter for 21 simultaneous communications for first responders. This is the urban surveillance, line of sight wireless again, primarily for the police department, between headquarters and units in the field. This is actually a use case we had from one of our customers. Now, let's see if I can have this go out to the internet and kind of see what that looks like. So this is a tracking of multiple vehicles, and you'll see that every single vehicle on this highway is able to be tracked by the same sensor in terms of speed. You guys haven't been speeding, have you? Now, the other option here, you recognize somebody? All right, so that was the multiple. Now this is the single.
Notice that it can differentiate between multiple vehicles and one vehicle. So it's following the truck, even though there are other cars, it does not pick up. Law enforcement would love to have this. It will even track it through a forest as you see it coming up. It'll anticipate the direction and keep tracking it. This is about 400 feet up, which will be the limit in the continental U.S. for UAV surveillance. Now the forest is coming up. Let's see if it still keeps up with the truck. All right, here we go. Still tracking. All right, so that's a good example. So this is the rural surveillance that we talked about earlier for mountainous areas. More traffic monitoring. This is that use case for disaster recovery or communications links. This is the example I talked about for DARPA for those 300-meter unmanned subs launching unmanned aerial vehicles. Another command and control port. And I'm going to see if we can launch and show you guys the vehicle flying. This was our second test flight of the V-2. The goal here was to make sure we could control the aircraft close in. You notice the vertical takeoff. No, it needs no runways, needs no launcher. Second goal was to take it up to 400 feet, which is the U.S. Continental National Airspace limit. And for the U.S., you can only weigh 25 pounds or less on unmanned aerial vehicles for the national airspace. This was our test taking off and landing on water. We know of no other UAV that does this today. You'll notice the rear turbine go up. Now we're flying just on that rear turbine. We'll kick in the laterals when needed. Most UAV operators hesitate when they operate over water. We don't. The production B2s will be made out of carbon fiber. This one's not. So that's what I wanted to show you today about Airship Technologies Group, just so you can get an idea of where the technology is going. We hope to be very competitive in this market. We have 287 pre-orders. We're actually in non-disclosure working with the Warm Springs Indian tribe right now for a potential assembly site. And our production air vehicles are made out of Hood River, Oregon. Thank you very much.
We could take probably one or two questions before we transition in. Okay, we got our two questions.
One of the challenges that I saw right away when we started talking is that the information that we have on unmanned vehicles that unfortunately began to be called drones is the controversy that created over it being used by the U.S. government and military to kill people. Drones, one of the problems with unmanned vehicles, I want to ask you this question, is that people's image that it's bad, that it's to hurt people. And then locally, we were from Portland, but in Seattle, mostly the information about the Seattle Police Department does not have a very good relationship with the African American community, wanting to be able to spy and use drones to catch quote unquote criminals. So that creates not a very good image. It was helpful for me to hear you say right at the beginning of your remarks, the life-saving and non-military, non-police usages for this vehicle. So my question to you is, how do you think that your company and others are going to be able to create an imagery about these unmanned vehicles that you're producing in such a way that you're able to build mass support and the imagery is not just, killing people or catching criminals?
So the question is, unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, are very controversial, and primarily because of the use of the Predator drones in the two wars we've had in Afghanistan and Iraq, and killing civilians. We started out our project, our program, as a first responder customer base. And we are concerned with security as well. And we will abide by the security rules, ordinances of various cities, especially Portland. Any use of a camera, be it on a helicopter or a fixed-wing airplane or an unmanned airplane, will have to have a court order. And so even if we have the Airscape application on a mobile app where the law enforcement officer can dial up a requirement, they have to put the court order into that app before we provide that video on demand. And that tells us it's been authorized by city ordinance and the judge.
Thank you. We have one more question here.
My question is along the same lines, Jerry, in terms of the moral ethical issues that drones or UAVs bring to mind. And I'm mostly concerned that we have situations, particularly in urban, dense areas where people of color, particularly black and brown people, and it's interesting that you're going to be using the reservation. It's also been used on the red as well. As a surveillance vehicle, not for our benefit, but a containment. Most of us, if we've lived in certain areas around the country, if they were densely populated, whether it's Latino or African Americans, know about the helicopter searchlights that are over our houses and where our children play. And thinking about these drones, that's kind of on my mind. Are they going to be, because we're dealing with a privacy issue, a constitutional issue, freedom of, right to happiness. And if we're living in an urban area or even rural where we're constantly under surveillance, that's tantamount to prison surveillance.
I would agree if it's unchecked surveillance, even with today's technology, helicopters. I grew up in Los Angeles. I saw the helicopters with spotlights. It was common practice. I'm not sure what kind of city ordinance or court order they had, but with airship, I will demand that we only provide video on demand for court-ordered surveillance, not discovery kind of surveillance, what you're alluding to there. Because I actually know what you're talking about, having grown up in LA in the African American community. So I think it's with people like us getting into this business, where we have that cultural history that can help make a difference in shaping this new burgeoning industry. We have 75 use cases, and they have nothing to do with looking at people's backyards. And the way we got to 75 use cases was by watching the 6 o'clock news every night for about 6 months. And we always ask ourselves, could that problem that they're showing us on the news be helped by an unmanned aerial vehicle? That's how we got to 75 different use cases. And that's a part of the Airscape application. So anywhere from agriculture, where farmers are trying to find, ranchers are trying to find their cattle, to farms where they're trying to look at the crops and use UAVs to spray the crops, to search and rescue for people who have been lost on Mount Hood. Instead of sending up one helicopter that costs you over $1 million a year to maintain, you can send up clusters of drones looking for that lost person, 2 or 3 drones at a time. And you don't have to spend energy to fly these drones because they're clean technology, energy based. So these are some of the things we think about when we think about privacy and the other use cases.
Could you briefly describe the process of starting from an idea and going to leading us into production?
This idea began on my lunch hour at Hughes Aircraft Company, where I drew the UAV on the back of a napkin. I still have that napkin. The aircraft that's flying today looks very similar to what I drew on that napkin. But you have to tell people about your ideas. If you have these ideas, I feel that we get ideas because we can actually do something about them. But if you never tell people about your ideas, they just simply remain an idea. And so I would go on science and technology speaking engagements periodically through those couple of decades. I would show people some of the later designs that we had come up with. We made about 3 different mock-ups before we did our flying prototype. And I was happy, and then we developed a website. And I think the website started bringing people together and asking to become involved in Airship. So we're up to about 16 people. They all have their day jobs today. But I've offered 8 of those people permanent assignments as we go into production. Most of them are in Oregon, but we have people 2 in India, 1 in Russia, 1 in Israel, and the rest are in the U.S. So thank you so much.
We will be available afterwards for more questions. So now we're going to dive into our next speaker. And, this is a very important topic that we are looking at. And one of the things we were talking about as an organization was the future of the Breakfast Group and the past and the history of the Breakfast Group. How many people in the room have heard about STEM? Now, we just had a conversation. We sort of had like a fireside chat. I think we were having it with Ernie. And we were talking about some of the projects and programs that the breakfast group has been involved with over the years. There was a program, and he'll have to help me out on this because of his wisdom. There was a program that the breakfast group did back a long time ago, in the 80s, that was centered around technology. Ernie, you want to say a few words about that? I know it's on the spot, but you would probably say it better than I would.
It was back in the early 90s. We had a program called Biosphere Tomorrow. The program was housed at Seattle Central Community College, and we used Seattle Community College instructors to staff the program. We brought in students from junior high school, students of color, who expressed interest in math, science, technology, engineering. The program ran for 8 weeks during the summer, and it was funded by a 3-year grant from the National Science Foundation. I think the grant the total grant was around $93,000, so about $30,000 each year for the production. Once the 3rd year was over, we weren't able to find funders to continue. But for that 3 years, we really got a lot of kids introduced to technology. And our big wrap up in our 3rd year was we had a big luncheon with Robert Johnson, VET, as our keynote speaker. So it was our first step into the STEM training.
So you can see, we've been talking about the possibility of technology playing an impact on young people for years. And the thing that we thought about as an organization was, what do we want to do going forward? We want to continue our vision, youth and families hitting the highest levels in education and economic opportunities. So with that being said, Mike Green is with Scale Up America, and I had the pleasure of hearing him speak at the economic forum that they had in Tacoma a few months ago, and it was a really good presentation. So please, I know we're running long on time. Please, try to stay as long as you can and hear this message because it's really, really powerful. Mike, are you ready? All right, here we go. Mike Green.
So I have a lot to say to you today. I've prepared some notes so I can stay on time. And we had a PowerPoint presentation, but apparently there's some technical difficulties getting it to you. So you're going to have to listen closely because I'm going to go through this fast so that I don't take up too much more of your time. But there's a lot of data involved here. And there's a lot of information that many of you have never heard before. And if you're students in this room, you have never heard this. And oh, by the way, you never will in your schools, especially if you're seniors, because you're about to transition out. So pay attention because you're going to get some information that you can take back to your classmates and to your schools. And it's important that you know this, and it's important that you share this. So first of all, let me thank you all for having me here. Al Heron, who seemed to have populated half this room. Thank you very much. And I have some good news. But to get there, we're going to have to go through some realities of the economic paradigms of today and yesterday. The demographics of the United States and its economy has fundamentally changed. But so has the transition and the shifts of how we do business and how we create wealth in America. In the 19th century, we had an agrarian economy. Everybody know what an agrarian economy is? Agriculture. That's how we grew the nation's wealth. In the 20th century, we shifted into a manufacturing economy. But right after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, the nation's economy began to transition again toward a knowledge-based, tech-driven, globally competitive innovation economy. The hallmark of the new innovation economy is fast-paced disruption of industry businesses models and shortened lifespans of those businesses, both old and new. The good news is that the disruption is causing many of the old guard institutions to crack and crumble. These are institutions and societal norms that once segregated opportunity and prevented upward mobility for the vast majority of us who were born into the bottom socioeconomic sectors. In other words, the innovation economy lifted the weight of the foot that once rested heavily on the backs of many of the historically disenfranchised and disconnected minority populations in America. Well, that's good news. The bad news is that no one told us about it. No one told us about the innovation economy and the new economic game that's being played, nor how to play it. But the good news is that Black Americans, since the end of the Civil War, have made strong progress and competed in every economy for 100 years through the 19th and 20th centuries. We built schools, colleges, universities. We conducted research, commercialized ideas. We were inventors and innovators. We established multi-million-dollar businesses and even built our own Wall Street. There are many of you here today who are part of that generation that competed and succeeded. Ladies and gentlemen, today though, if you look at any major city in the nation, you will see Black communities filled with poverty and literally surrounded by landscapes of material prosperity. In 1968, Dr. King summarized the entirety of Black America's progress in his I Have a Dream speech. You probably have all heard I Have a Dream, but you probably didn't hear or remember this line, and I quote, 100 years after slavery, the Negro finds himself living on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. Look around today, nothing's changed. But that stagnation is not the real bad news. There's data to go along with it. Black unemployment today is twice the rate of white unemployment and has remained so every year since Dr. King delivered his iconic speech. And there's more. Remember the progress I mentioned earlier, how Black Americans competed in every economy for 100 years? Colleges and universities will build businesses and local economic ecosystems service our communities. Remember that? Well, the good news is that Black Americans are still competing today. We lead the nation in entrepreneurial growth at 60%, more than triple the national average, which is 18% growth. The reason that's important is because entrepreneurship is the American dream. It's not buying homes. Entrepreneurship is the foundation from which we create generational wealth and increased net worth. Do we talk about that in our hair salons, in our barbershops? Entrepreneurship is America's most needed resource today. From the White House to Silicon Valley, everybody's talking about how do we create more entrepreneurs. The nation simply needs more job creators. And some would say we are moving quickly toward an era where all of us need to have the ability to identify opportunity, develop solutions to market problems, and monetize those solutions. Well, today I'm happy to report that our competitive spirit remains alive and well. But the worst news of all is that we lack the understanding of how to compete in today's innovation economy, and we have failed to pass that information on to our children who grow up with very little idea of how to compete in a 21st century knowledge-based, tech-driven, globally competitive economy. They are still searching for 20th century service sector jobs, many of which don't exist anymore. Even our entrepreneurship growth is muted by the fact that all of our 1.9 million Black-owned businesses today produce less than 1% GDP. I'll repeat that. All of our Black-owned businesses today produce less than 1% GDP. That is the best we have done since slavery. During Reconstruction following the Civil War, all Black-owned businesses produced less than 1% GDP. When Dr. King decried the economic challenges of his day, all Black-owned businesses produced less than 1% GDP. This important statistic has not changed in more than 150 years, and we don't talk about it. But there's good news. The innovation economy has broken down many barriers to entry. We have many examples of how to compete at the highest levels and at the fastest pace of this new economy. Across all sectors and industries, we see examples of Black Americans succeeding individually. The most obvious is the political sector, where we see many mayors of many of the major cities, and of course there's the Black family in the White House. Ben Barry, today, he represents that unbroken competitive advantage that we have had. From his dad, who was a Tuskegee Airman, to Ben today. They're changing the face of aviation. We compete at the highest levels. We can play any game there is if we're taught how to play it. But there's more success we don't see, and our children remain ignorant about it, which is a problem. In the technology sector, we can point to Silicon Valley, and when you think of Silicon Valley, you don't think of us. Do you? No. But here's a little bit of information. At the turn of the century, John Thompson, and I'm not talking about the former coach of Georgetown, John Thompson was the only Black man in America to lead a major technology company. That company is Symantec, the maker of Norton Antivirus. Thompson ultimately left the company as chairman of the board and started Virtual Instruments in Silicon Valley. When Bill Gates decided to step down as chairman of the board of Microsoft, a company he founded, it was Thompson who was selected to fill his seat. But there was no fanfare across America that marked this historic transition when it took place. So few of us even know that an alum of Florida A&M, an HBCU, is sitting in one of the pinnacle positions in America's most prolific technology sector. We don't celebrate those heroes. So what about Silicon Valley's famous venture capital industry, where Black Americans are statistically nil in the venture capital and angel investment sector? We are risk averse. We don't invest in ourselves and we don't invest in others. Is that a problem? But guess what? Individuals like Ken Coleman, a Black man, has found his way to the top. He is currently the advisor to Andreessen Horowitz and an advisor to Ben Horowitz himself, the iconic VC firm with headquarters on Silicon Valley's famed Sand Hill Road. So what about philanthropy? Impact investment. That's the wave of the future. Where are we? Well, look no further than Emmett Carson, who is the founding CEO of the world's largest community foundation. I didn't say the nation's largest community foundation. I said the world's largest community foundation. Yes, it's a Black man at the top in Silicon Valley. Do we know about these things? He's managing nearly $5 billion in assets. Do we know who Emmett Carson is? You may say, okay, Mike. But what about coding and software design engineering? And I say, look no further than Silicon Valley, where everything you see on LinkedIn is because a Black man made that decision. Steve Johnson leads a team of more than 200 design engineers at LinkedIn and decides everything regarding user experience and interaction on LinkedIn's site, including the new design that they're coming out with. And in the education sector, look no further than Starter League in Chicago, where a new coding academy co-founded by two Black men is disrupting the education landscape with a direct-to-consumer vocational tool that teaches students how to code to industry standards. It's only 9 months, and then they help you find a job. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm tired of looking across the landscape of Black Americans, seeing our boys and young men wasting their talents and creative ingenuity. I'm sick of seeing them languish in public schools where no one has an inkling of how to prepare them to compete in the innovation economy. I know they can compete. I know that if you teach them any game, they can play it, and they can play it well. So I'm sick and tired of watching the stereotypical images on TV of our boys and young men in media when I know what they're capable of. But we don't tell our own stories. And our journalists who populate newsrooms at the highest levels of media haven't a clue about what I'm relaying to you today. And oh, by the way, I'm a journalist. 18 years award-winning, digital and print. CNN, New York Times Leadership Academy Fellow, and I led the digital media experiments for Dow Jones throughout the transition. So most of all, I'm really excited. I'm not just sick and tired. I'm really excited because I'm a doer. I'm not just a thinker. I'm not just a talker, but I'm a doer. Our kids are bright, talented, creative, and innovative. I believe they can play any game that we teach them to play. And so I started Saving America's Black Boys a couple of years ago. I launched it at South by Southwest Education Conference. They invited me back again this year. I met Debbie Hink there. She watched me and my team present. Microsoft came, Google came, a number of folks came. Kauffman was there, Kellogg was there. The good news is that this nation needs us. They need our ingenuity. They need our talent. The other good news is that we have unbroken generations of people who know how to compete. We have entrepreneurs in this room who are successful. We know how to play this game, and nobody can tell me we can't play the technology game. We're playing it. Nobody can tell me we can't play the finance game. We are playing it. Every sector you see, we have black people at the top. Right here in Seattle, you have a company called Intellectual Ventures. The chief operating officer is Adrienne Brown, a black woman. We don't talk about these folks. We don't celebrate these folks. We don't hold them up high. We don't write about them. Our children don't know they exist. Sigma Pi Phi, the boule. Most of our boys don't know what that is. But you know what? These folks have over 100 years of consistent, competitive success at the highest levels. They are PhDs, they are doctors, they are scientists, they are entrepreneurs. And you know what? They make sure their children are successful. They create wealth and they pass it down. Where are the boulets? Any boulets in this room? My man. So we don't have to look outside of our community for success. We don't have to look outside of our community for inclusive competitiveness. We have it in our community. The problem is we're disconnected. We're disconnected from knowledge networks. We're disconnected from ourselves. We're fragmented. It's a problem. So I'm going to wrap up here, but I'm going to tell you some good news. The entry point to today's innovation economy is STEM education. Period. Cut and dry. If you don't know what STEM education is, it's science, technology, engineering, and math. Some would say STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. Because arts do drive innovation, including technology innovation. STEM or STEAM is the entry point to two pipelines, a high-wage, tech-based workforce. That's the first pipeline. The second pipeline is a high-growth, tech-driven entrepreneurial landscape. And entrepreneurs is where jobs are created and generational wealth is developed. Entrepreneurship. Period. If we have 100% of our folks employed, 100%, we will not move that 1% needle, that less than 1% GDP. We cannot move that needle unless we are the job creators, unless we are employing people, unless we are creating wealth, unless we are adding to the economic competitiveness of this nation. And guess what? We lead the nation in entrepreneurial growth. Where are we? We're still working on 20th century mindsets. We have to move to the 21st century. So, I'll end on this. We can play these games too. The good news is America needs us today. Karen Mills, the head of the SBA, says entrepreneurship is America's secret sauce. Pre-recession, we had a tremendous amount of entrepreneurial growth. Post-recession, we haven't got back to where we were. They need us. We need the nation. And we need to teach our young people how to compete today. They need to know the language, the vernacular. They need to understand the big picture and how to engage in it. So we first must be informed. And in order to do that, my organization, Scale Up America, which is connected to the Clinton Global Initiative and the High Growth Entrepreneurship Working Group that I'm a part of, and it is also connected to the White House and in alignment with President Obama's My Brother's Keeper, we have decided we are going to produce a series of inclusive competitiveness summits. And we are going around the nation with these inclusive competitiveness summits, and we are teaching and informing the public about how to engage in their local innovation ecosystems so that they know where the resources are. The next day after those summits, we're having a local gathering of stakeholders. We're bringing together the stakeholders and talking about creating a permanent collaboration, creating an inclusive framework, economic framework that doesn't currently exist. And we're putting a seat at the table of the CEDS planning, Comprehensive Economic Development Strategies planning, that every region in the country has, a seat at the table for those disconnected communities that don't even know it exists. We're going to empower these entrepreneurs. We're going to empower America. We're going to include Black America, Brown America, in the knowledge-based, tech-driven, tech-based innovation economy. And we're going to do that. We can do it here too. But it's up to you. Thank you very much.
I know you have a lot of questions. We can take 2, maybe 3 questions.
Do you have your presentation that you can share?
I will send Al the presentation so that Al can share it with you all.
Great.
And right off the bat, you can go to TacomaEconomicSolutions.com to get some of his previous stuff. And you can go to our website, thebreakfastgroup.org, to get a follow-up on this, as well as SeattleEconomicSolutions.com. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for you to get more of this.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and I offer a coalition with some of your chambers. There's a major movement around the country on diversity on chambers of commerce, so
We should talk. Any other questions?
You mentioned the Brothers Keeper and Economic Innovation Summits, forums. A little bit more about
On
that.
February 27th, the president announced My Brother's Keeper initiative. And 11 foundations and corporations formed and raised $200 million to support the implementation of My Brother's Keeper. All of the federal agencies, I repeat, all of them, and their secretaries, the highest level of decision-making process, have been tasked by the president through memorandum to come together and find a way. And they have to spend their own money to do this. That creates opportunity. They have to spend their own money to find a way to empower young boys and young men of color to connect to the innovation economy. The executive director of that My Brother's Keeper task force is Jim Shelton, who is Deputy Secretary of Education. We are working directly with Jim Shelton. And Michael Smith was the newly appointed director of the Social Innovation Fund, which is looking to fund other funds that are impact investors and helping connect people of color to the innovation economy. Any other questions?
So the good news is this conversation is not complete. You heard us talk about how this is in our vision. Youth and families hitting the highest level in education and economic opportunities. And so I'd like to have our sponsors come up and say a few key words.
Well, Turner has a Youth Force 2020 program, and it's designed to mentor youth, work with the K-12 school system, and then to introduce students to the construction industry. Now, I could have chosen the program, kindergarten, elementary school, a lot of organizations do that. I chose high school because they will be our leaders tomorrow. Personally, I raised 2 sons as a single mom. I say single mom because if I say divorce, it implies somebody was there to help. They weren't, so single mom. I know it's important to mentor young men because I gathered mentors around my son, many of which are in the Breakfast Group. I believe that in order to heal our community, we need to take care of our young men and help them be positioned in their rightful place as leaders of the household. So that's my personal passion, and I really appreciate that Turner allows me to bring that to our Youth Force program. And as they said, I can't say no when I'm asked to do something because, you know, this program has to grow and succeed.
Thank you. Again, my name is George Kane, and I'm here with representing Morgan Stanley at Amani's very, very gracious invitation. And I would just like to share our commitment, which really starts with some thank yous. The first is a thank you to all of the founders, and both the long-term and the shorter term, as I found out with one gentleman who said, I've been here 8 years and I feel like I'm still a rookie here at the Breakfast Group. To all of you who have really identified the challenges as well as the opportunities to really help make our community better, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to participate. A second thank you is entrusting what we think is one of our finest, which is Amani Harris, with the leadership role of your organization. We know, Morgan, we can spend $1 zillion out there advertising and marketing, but we know that our real story is told by the people who represent us in our communities, and we know that that story is told much, much better with the man who's got a plan, who takes action with that plan. And with that, Amani, thank you for all you do for our organization. And lastly, your goals are our goals. Economic enrichment in our entire community, education, as well as making sure that our organization can serve the entire community that we live and that we work in every day. It is something we're committed to. We will do everything we can to be a willing and active and inclusive partner with you all. So thank you. Thank you.
My name is Thomas Bieran, representing the Seattle Seahawks. Well, Mike Flood, who's our VP of Community Relations, has been a part of the Breakfast Club for some time now, and he really brought me in and showed me what these guys do, and it's just been a great transition ever since. So it's very important to help out with the African American community and building new entrepreneurs and just really just making it better community overall. So I know mentoring young African Americans is very, very important, not only to our community, but to me, myself. I think it's very, very important. So
we'd like to have Mike Green and Ben Berry come up. We have a special presentation from Mr. Mitchell. Now, many of you may or may not know about the ties that our young people design, but you will hear about them right now. Paul's ready to do his presentation.
Yeah, well, I'd like to say, I want to thank everybody who came today to make the presentation with our sponsorships. Without our sponsorships, and with our guest speakers, man, you got just a hit. You got to give us information that we needed bad for our young men. One of the things we do as our program, as part of the message, is design ties for sales and for our banquet that we'll have on May 2nd. And if you're around May 2nd, come to the Four Seasons and join us at Fairmont, Olympic Hotel Fairmont, at 11:30, downtown Seattle. We got some great action there. There's great speakers, and we're gonna have a great time. So we want you to come and enjoy with our students from all over Seattle. And these are some of the ties that the students, every tie you see here was designed by our students. You'd be surprised with the color. Like everybody keeps mentioning talent, run deep in our community with our young men. Of course, we'll earn them, everybody get the hook over it. As time is short, first person I want to recognize is my good friend, Ruby Jones. She's been with us and she does a great job. Since we only got one time, Scar, around your neck there. This is one of our designs for our students. There we go. And nice. For the Seahawks, I think it's green, isn't it? Here, there's a green tie for you. Designed by a student. Oh, sponsors. Who sponsors the ties? Who sponsors? Turner. Without her, we can't do anything. All right. Which one?
Thank you.
Oh,
Like that one.
all right. How about that Google? Yeah. Too bad you didn't go on.
I'll take it.
I would have said thank you again. Give them my hand for God.
Thank you so much to each one of our sponsors again, Seattle Seahawks, Turner Construction, Morgan Stanley. Thank you to our speakers, the very CEO, Example in Motion, and Mike Green, Competitive Inclusiveness. That's the story. Thank you.